let's talk about hay fever. Let's talk about seasonal allergies. And for those of you who are worried about it, okay, again, we're coming out of the winter now, going to the spring, and this is where things start to get crazy with seasonal allergies. This is Natural Ways to Treat Seasonal Allergies by Kathleen McCoy. Now, it's interesting. When I was younger, I developed seasonal allergies. I would probably say when I was, I want to say 14, 13, 14. It could have been younger, but I would say 13, 14 was probably when they really started to take hold. And it was bad, right? So, it was every spring and every fall. And you knew it was coming, and you would start to feel it. And I would start to feel those allergies. I would start to feel the itchy eyes coming on. I would start to feel the runny nose. I would start to feel, my breathing wasn't as good. I would start to feel all these things. And then what did I do? Okay. Or when I was younger, I didn't want to deal with these things. So I would end up on over-the-counter medication. So I would get antihistamines, right? Now, the interesting thing is that even when I was younger, they had these over-the-counter antihistamines that would make you drowsy. And then they started coming out with the ones that were non-drowsy. But every time I would use the one that was non-drowsy, it wasn't as powerful as the one that would make you drowsy. So I would still feel the allergies, and I'd be sneezing like crazy. I'd have to have tissues. My face, my eyes would get swollen. I mean, it was really bad. And this continued through my teenage years into my 20s. And it was like clockwork every spring and every fall. The fall was actually worse, which is very interesting because I always remembered by my birthday, because my birthday's in September. I always remembered by my birthday that I would, my allergies would be out of control. So I'd be, I'd have a cake in front of me and I try to not to sneeze on the cake and all this. But what would happen was, I would get on these antihistamines and they would make me crazy drowsy. And then I would have to drive around like that and try to keep myself awake, right? Now, they would work because they would stop everything. But again, they weren't addressing the problem. They were just stopping it. And what are they doing? They're basically stopping the release of histamine, which is what your body's releasing, right? Your mast cells are releasing histamine to deal with the allergies, okay? And that's what they were doing. So essentially, this is what happened with me, through all those years. Now, what did I do? When I started to clean up my diet, okay, and keep in mind, kind of going back for a second, I was on antibiotics almost every year of my childhood, okay, and this is going back to the antibiotics piece, right? Every year of my childhood. Why? Because I would get bronchitis every year. Bronchitis would basically become a bacterial infection. I would end up going to the doctor. My doctor would put me on antibiotics. I'd have to finish that cycle of antibiotics, and then I'd be good for that year. And then the next year would happen. And it would just repeat the same cycle. And I was constantly on antibiotics. Now, my mom didn't know. She didn't, back then you didn't have all the information that you have now, right? I didn't even know what antibiotics did. I just know they eventually, made me feel better, right? Took care of the infection, and that was that, okay? I didn't know I was destroying my gut. I didn't know that, okay? So that led me to the development of allergies as I go along. It's absolutely 100%. Why? Because I was dealing with a lot of gut issues, a lot of stomach viruses, and a lot of gut issues prior to my allergies. And then eventually the allergies started. Okay. So it was just, again, it was that house of cards that would come down. So, when I look back at it now, I'm like, wow, it was the perfect storm between the bronchitis, the allergies, the medications, right? All the medications that I would be on, all the antibiotics that I would be on, all these types of things. And then, of course, using these over-the-counter antihistamines over and over and over. And I found my allergies getting worse as I was going through life. This is when I started to say, okay, enough is enough, because this is not working. I'm just going to get worse and worse, and I'm not going to be able to even go outside at some point, right? So this is where I started to clean up the diet, because my diet was pizza and Chinese food, basically, and I was a broke college kid. I did everything I could, but I cleaned up the diet. I started to get on supplements. What are the supplements I took? Okay. And I did a lot of research on this, right? Multivitamin. I started taking multivitamin. I started taking vitamin C. Okay. Because I started doing some reading that vitamin C actually helps with the histamine response. And then a few years later, quercetin. I started taking some quercetin on this. Okay. Again, cleaned up the diet. started doing some more exercise, started to get myself, started to eat more salad, started to eat more good food, lowered the sugar. Didn't eat as much pizza, right? Again, with all the cheese and all that type of stuff as well. And as I started to, now again, this was not an overnight thing. This was not an overnight thing. This was little by little, every year. But what I found was the more I did this, the less my allergies would bother me and the less bronchitis I would get. So I was getting a 2-for-1, which was great. So I said, all right, this is working. So I just kept doing it. And it basically became a habit. Taking these supplements, eating good food as much as I can, making good choices in my food, and then also, just doing everything I can to just to get my immune system back in check. Things started to go away. And sure enough, the allergies disappeared. It is amazing. And again, this took years. There was patience involved. But you know what? What was my alternative? My alternative was I could have been on those antihistamines for the rest of my life. I could have been, dealing with these seasonal allergies for the rest of my life. And another thing, and maybe you guys who have allergies can relate to this. When you know that the allergy season is coming, it does something to you, right? Because it starts to stick in your head. Oh my God, allergies are coming. I'm going to start to feel it. And as soon as you sneeze, right, it gets worse, right? The mind has a lot to do with that too, because the mind, what does the mind do? The mind says, hey, allergies are coming, and this is where your reactive mind starts to react. And it actually makes it worse, okay? So what I realized was that the less my allergies started to come, the less I was thinking about it. And sure enough, they started to disappear. Even in my mind, they started to disappear. So it was a whole chain reaction that happened, okay? Now, this is something you have to remember about allergies. It is an immune system problem. And I've talked about this before. It is your immune system hyper reacting to a substance, a foreign substance. Now, that could be pollen, ragweed, some kind of food, some kind of drink, whatever it is. But it could be dust, it could be whatever, but it's your immune system reacting to it, right? Because you take two people in the same room, one can be reacting and one won't. What is the difference? It's how the immune system reacts. That's what allergies do, okay? So what does your immune system do? It senses that this is a foreign invader, and what does it do? It starts to establish the police, the mast cells, and all these cells start to go to work, right? It starts to create inflammation, right? It starts to secrete histamine. And what does histamine do? Histamine starts to create this inflammatory process in your body. And what happens? You start to get flare-ups, right? This is where you start to get itchy eyes. You start to get the runny nose. You start to get the cough. You start to get the sneezing. You start to get all these things. You got this inflammatory process starts off, right? Why? Because your body is trying to expel the foreign invader. That's what the allergy is at the end of the day. It's your immune system hyperreacting, creating all this inflammation to expel the foreign invader. That's essentially at its core what it is. It is an immune system issue. So what do we have to do? We have to fortify our immune system. We have to get our immune system in check, okay? Do everything we can to boost it, to try to bring down the histamine, to try to get our immune system not so hyperreactive, to try to support and get a better response from these allergies when we encounter them. Okay? At the end of the day, that's what it is. So, with that backdrop, let's talk about this article. So, we've got about 40 million to 60 million people each year, or up to 20%, of people living in certain countries are dealing with some kind of hay fever, okay, or whatever allergies you can think of. So research indicates nearly 75% of people in the United States who suffer from seasonal allergies are allergic to ragweed, which was me. Unlike grass, trees, and flowers that produce pollen in the spring and the summer, pollen due to ragweed is often highest during the fall. So ragweed was my big thing. That was the big thing that I was allergic, because in the spring I felt it, but not as bad as fall. Okay, so that's where the highest. So let's look at some of the symptoms, right? Again, what we talked about: stuffy, runny nose, postnasal drip, excess mucus production, sneezing, itchy, watery eyes, scratchy throat, decreased focus, exhaustion and sleep disorders, mood swings, irritability, low blood pressure, asthma, eczema, and even ear infections. All these things can tie together just due to all different types of allergies, okay? Things to think about, okay? So think about if you're dealing with any of these issues. Now, what they're saying is that the allergies are getting worse as time is going along. Okay, so in the year 2000, pollen counts registered at 8,455 grains per cubic meter. Now, by 2040, they're estimating that the number is projected to be well over 20,000 grains per cubic meter. And they're talking about climate change, and they're saying that has something to do with it. Whether that's true or not, you guys have to, can decide that. So, again, what are the major causes? Pollen, ragweed, mold, grasses, residue from trees, and flowers, especially with the hay fevers, okay? So, again, it's the histamine release that we've got to deal with. So, according to Johns Hopkins Medicine, allergies are actually disorders of the immune system, exactly what I've said. The body overreacts to harmless substances and produces antibodies to attack the substance, okay? And if you're susceptible to certain things, it can make it even worse. So if you have a weakened immune system, right? If you're dealing with any kind of illness, that can make it worse. Trauma or some kind of surgery, underlying illnesses, high amounts of emotional stress, lack of sleep, or even if you're pregnant, right? That can also lead into this. Okay, and keep in mind the pregnancy thing that we talked about in the last segment. Again, pregnancy, microbiome, all together, right? Stress plays a huge part in keeping your immune defenses, and your stress managed, okay, or, keeping your immune defenses managing stress. You got to make sure that you get that all in check, because that can worsen your allergies as you go along. So what are some of the natural treatments? Okay. Obviously, you want to try to avoid the allergens as much as possible. Now, if it's pollen or ragweed and all that stuff outside, it's very difficult unless you don't go outside. You need to go outside. But there's things you can do to try to lessen it, okay? So let's talk about food first, foods to avoid as far as allergies, okay? You can try an elimination diet. There are certain things that will worsen allergies. You can take a look at alcohol, caffeine, conventional dairy, chocolate, peanuts, sugar, artificial sweeteners, processed foods, even some kind of fruits can be inflammatory, like bananas and cucumbers, different types of things like chamomile, wheat, and soy. All these things can cause allergies, okay? Keep those things in mind. If you feel that when you take in those things and certain things flare up, this is when you start to eliminate that, right? And then see if there's any more flare-ups after that. So, many people also find relief when they're avoiding foods that cause mucus production. Okay, cheese does a lot of that. Milk products does a lot of that, right? A lot of dairy. So again, if you were like me, eating a lot of pizza, I was drinking milk, a lot of chocolate milk in those days, right? So again, a lot of mucus production. So another thing to keep in mind. Now, if you have a ragweed allergy, it's important to avoid melons, bananas, cucumbers, sunflower seeds, echinacea, and chamomile, as they can trigger an allergic response in your system. Again, things that I didn't know when I was that age. Now, some of the foods to enjoy that can actually help to support allergies, especially the seasonal allergies, right? Raw local honey, hot spicy foods, bone broth, probiotic rich foods, pineapple. Now, pineapple can go either way, because there are a lot of people, including my wife, that have some allergies to pineapple, so you have to be careful with that. Apple cider vinegar, fresh organic vegetables, grass-fed meats, free-range poultry, and wild-caught fish. Okay. Now, raw local honey is at the top of the list, because in a randomized control study published in the International Archives of Allergy and Immunology, patients who consumed honey had significantly better control of their allergies compared to those on conventional allergy medications. Okay. Now, local honey works to relieve symptoms because it contains local pollen that causes your allergies and helps helps the immune system to deal with it better. Okay, so a couple of teaspoons of honey, put it in your tea. even in your coffee. I've done that. Okay, raw local honey, put it in my coffee. It actually tastes pretty good too, by the way. And it actually can help. Okay, so try that. But it has to be a good raw, local, unfiltered honey. Get it from your local farmer's market if at all possible. Maybe a little bit more, but it's worth it. Okay. Also, probiotic rich foods that are good to support the healthy gut, improve digestion, increase energy levels, and much more. Okay. So things like kefir, sauerkraut or kimchi, kombucha, natto, which is a Japanese food, right? Tastes nasty, by the way. Yogurt and raw cheese, all these types of things that are good for the gut. Again, going back to keep the gut in balance. That's key. Now, the enzyme bromelain, which is found in pineapple, and it is very good for this, again, if you're not allergic to it. And also, in addition to high levels of vitamin B and vitamin C and other essential nutrients, can help to reduce your reactions to allergy. Again, that's vitamin C. That's also part of that as well. Okay. Fresh organic vegetables, obviously, your dark leafy vegetables are good. Choose vegetables that are really, really high in antioxidants. Important. Clean proteins. If eating things like wild caught salmon, free range poultry. If you're meat eaters, organic grass fed beef, lamb are all important too. Wild salmon is rich in vitamins, by the way. Omega-3 fatty acids, essential minerals, and of course, protein. Okay, so I love salmon. I eat salmon a lot, and it's definitely wild caught. Now, let's take a look at supplements. What are the good supplements to take? And again, you want to start your supplements, I would suggest 30 to 60 days in advance of your allergy season because you want to get ahead of it. Don't wait till allergy season starts because it's a lot harder to deal with once you're in the throes of allergy season. Okay. So number one, spirulina. Those of you who don't know what that is, but it's basically kind of an algae. Okay. They sell it in powder form. It's a great thing. You can get it in a lot of superfood powders. 1 teaspoon per day helps to stop the release of histamine that causes symptoms. Okay. And in many studies, it was shown to significantly improve symptoms, including nasal discharge, sneezing, nasal congestion, and itching. And this was in a double-blind, placebo-controlled study. Number two, quercetin. Again, this is what I used, 1,000 milligrams per day. Research shows that quercetin, it's the flavonoid. It's found in fruits and, certain fruits, especially in the peels of apples. It's found in onions, okay? But it also helps to stop the production and the release of histamine, okay? So now, keep in mind that quercetin may interfere with certain medications, including antibiotics and cyclosporin and other different types of things. So again, you have to check it out, okay? But quercetin is great. If you're not on any kind of medications, it's a great thing to take. Number three, butterbur, okay? Butterbur, 500 milligrams per day. Butterbur has traditionally been used to treat bronchitis, excess mucus, and asthma. In a recent study of hay fever sufferers, it was also found to be effective as some allergic rhinitis medications, okay? So be careful with young children, though, okay? They shouldn't be taking supplements like this. Number four, probiotics. 50 billion international units or 2 to 6 capsules a day, depending on where you're getting it, okay? Probiotics modify the intestinal flora in the gut and help to boost the immune system, and they show promise in the treatment and the prevention of allergies. Number five, vitamin A, 2,000 milligrams per day. Vitamin A helps to fight inflammation and has an antihistamine effect. And next, bromelain, which again, from the pineapple, we talked about that, 1,000 milligrams per day. And stinging nettle, 300 to 500 milligrams twice per day as a homeopathic medicine, okay? It contains antihistamine and anti-inflammatory properties that helps to reduce the body's production of symptoms causing histamine, okay? So those are some of the things you can take as far as supplements that are great. Again, vitamin C and quercetin work together. So if you can take those two, it's a great thing. And maybe, some bromelain on top of that. But again, I would suggest my top 3 biggest things would be the probiotics, the vitamin C, and the quercetin. Those would be my big 3. And then clean up the diet, reduce the sugar. Okay. And then try to stay away from the allergens as much as possible. If you can do those things, then you're well on your way to help reducing the histamine response as time goes along. So those are things to think about. Other things you have to take a look at, just general lifestyle changes. Stay hydrated. Okay, so obviously drinking as much water as possible, because if you stay hydrated, that'll help to reduce the mucus, and or help the mucus come out, loosen up the mucus and help the mucus come out if you're dealing with a lot of mucus and mucosal discharge. Okay, obviously, again, limit exposure, close the windows, use air conditioners if you're indoors to lessen the exposure of all the stuff that's coming in from the outside. Shower before bed. Pollen dust left on your skin and your hair overnight can make your symptoms worse. Wash clothes and your bedding regularly. Okay, obviously freshly laundered bedding and clothes can help reduce incidental exposure to allergens. Wipe down your pets if you have dogs, because remember, dogs can carry these allergens in and out, especially when they're coming from in and out. And then replace carpeted areas with hard surfaced flooring or tile or something like that. Something that you can actually vacuum easily. You can get the dust out of there and stuff like that, because remember, the carpets actually hold a lot of the allergens in. So keep that in mind. And then if you can declutter as much as possible, that is good as well. And of course, if you can get some kind of system that helps to clean out and filter the air, those systems, you can get one for cheap now, put it in your bedroom when you're sleeping. And they have ones that actually are very even low in noise now. So you can use those that help to filter out some of those pollens and some of those things in the air. So again, these are all things you can do. You don't have to do every single one of them, but these are just all tips that you can use to lessen your, your exposure to these allergens. But, keep these things in mind when you're dealing with allergies. Okay. So, but remember, you have to remember, at the end of the day, like I said, it's an immune system problem. So we have to address the immune system as much as you can, which means the things that I talked about, and clean up the gut, lower the sugar, take the supplements, clean up the diet, and do those things. Okay, and lessen your exposure. You're well on your way to actually feeling better. Check it out. Try it out. Again, this is not 100%. Obviously, I can't make claims on this show, but I think if you do these things regularly, because it's a long term, you have to be prepared for a long-term process on this. But if you do these things, I think you will, start to feel better as time goes along.